Welcome back, folks. I hope you're having a good week so far. It is Wednesday, so we're halfway through. This video really does, to me, represent the beginning of American history. Yes, we've had over 2 centuries of people in the North American region, immigrants coming in, colonies being set up. We've had the British colonies for a long time, but that is part of British history. So this will begin American history. Before I begin, please make sure you have the subscribe button hit and the notifications on so that you are aware of all new content. This is the only series that has a schedule. Everything else posts as soon as I'm done with it, so you'll want to be aware of that. So in the past several videos, we've covered the founding of the colonies, the run-up to all the dissension and all the strife. We've covered the beginning of the end of the British colonies and up to the end of the Revolutionary War. It was 1781 that Cornwallis surrendered. But it wasn't until the 3rd of September 1783 that the Treaty of Paris was signed. This is the official ending of the American Revolution, with Britain agreeing that the colonies are now their own country. But it's not all smooth sailing from here. What we start with is the Articles of Confederation, and they are very, very basic. It does allow for the Confederation Congress to have a limited amount of oversight and power, but the colonies are still very distrustful of each other and of centralized power. They had been basically ruled by a tyrant who had very centralized power. So this is a very loose confederation of 13 colonies, 13 states now, that very much wanted to run themselves, but they did realize that as a confederation, they had to have some form of governmental body that sat at the very top of the chain. Now, the Articles of Confederation were actually signed and completed and agreed to in 1777, but it took until 1781 for them to be ratified by all 13, and that was Maryland in the last place, ratifying in 1781. This allowed for the Confederation Congress to borrow or create money. This did not allow for taxation. So it kind of shows that the colonies at this time knew taxation was just a way for a centralized government to say, your money is not yours. With the Articles of Confederation, Congress could borrow money from the states, but the states could say, no, we're not loaning it to you. It was also an arbitrating body to settle disagreements between states. It would, of course, also be the body that handled any interaction with the native tribes in the area. It also was similar to the Senate of today, more so than the House or Congress as a whole. One state, one vote. New York, much larger than Maryland, still one state, one vote. It was very much, we're all going to come together and we are all equal. This is actually, in a way, what would lead to people thinking about this when creating the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate later on, because there needed to be proportional representation. New York would have far more people to represent than Maryland or Rhode Island. So New York, in one sense, did need more representation, but in another sense, we're all states in the Union. So it became the bicameral congressional body. In one sense, modeled after Parliament or the Greeks, where you had those who you could lobby much more based on your size, but in another body, you had the same pull as anyone else in that body. But we're not there yet. We're still just with the Confederation Congress, where it is a very small body. But immediately after the Revolutionary War, they realized from the off, the new nation was in the red. We were broke. States could be asked for money, but they could refuse. And the Revolutionary War soldiers had not been paid. It wasn't like the military of today where you sign up and you're in the military the entire time. This was a militia where you go to fight and then you go home and you're paid for your time fighting. While you're in, your food, your housing, your medical care is all taken care of. You have no expenses during that time. And very often, men would either send someone to fight for them. They would use either their slaves or bondservants, or it would be one or two people going from a family, leaving older boys or leaving other people at home to run the farm. So the family is still provided for. But they still deserved their pay. With the states also in not so much dire straits, but also having to build from scratch, there wasn't money they could send to the federal government to pay the revolutionary soldiers. But in the Treaty of Paris, the borders of the United States were no longer the western borders of each colony. We now went all the way to the Mississippi, all the way north of Canada, south to Spanish Florida. So there was a lot of land. So the Northwest Territory became a way for people to buy more land. They were just originally territories that would eventually become Illinois, Wyoming, Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. But they were not represented in the government. They were just territories. Until a territory had 60,000 people in it, then it could apply to become a state. And thus it would have a seat at the table in the Confederation Congress. The problems didn't end there, though. You see, the Treaty of Paris basically said that the U.S. was a sovereign nation with all the rights and privileges of any sovereign nation. But Europe didn't really like that a nation full of farmers beat them in a war. Well, England. So Great Britain would not allow American ships into their port. Spain closed the lower Mississippi to shipping and trade. We were basically being told, yeah, you're a country, but we're not going to let you play. No trade. You can't sell to anybody, so you're stuck. You're on your own. There were tariffs on U.S. goods. Very much a childish, fine, you won, but I'm not going to let you have anything now. Move. Spain was an ally during the Revolutionary War, but we were an ally of convenience. Very much the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Spain hated Great Britain. They weren't antagonistic towards the colonies, or now the U.S., but neither were they friendly. It was very much, we're going to help you because you're fighting someone we hate. And when it's over, it's over. We're just going to go back to the way it was. Couple all of this with bad harvests. Congress could not raise taxes. They couldn't levy a tax to pay for anything. And you have a powder keg just waiting for the spark to set it off. And that spark was in Massachusetts when the state decided to raise taxes. And it was very much a, you will pay this or you will lose your business, your home, and you will go to jail. Daniel Shea and a group of people under him rebelled. They closed down the courts, marched on the state arsenal, but were stopped by the Massachusetts militia. There was no federal help to give. Massachusetts asked, but the Confederation Congress could not raise an army. They couldn't even pay the army that had just won them their freedom. So there was no way for the federal government to help when Daniel Shea and his people rebelled in Massachusetts over being taxed and told, you will pay or you will go to jail. This was the like I said, the powder keg and spark that led the colonies that have become states to realize there really does need to be a centralized federal government. So, during the Continental Congress, we declared our independence. We had the Articles of Confederation, but all of this led to a situation where the states were going broke, the country was broke, we couldn't trade, we couldn't feed ourselves as well due to bad harvests. All of this leads to the realization that government is a necessary evil. Now, until this time, the only real centralized government anyone in the country had seen was the crown. King George and his predecessors. Very much a my way or the noose type of government. They were very distrustful of a strong federal government. They were very distrustful of what that could lead to. But they realized they needed it. And that is where the the Constitutional Congress and the Constitutional Convention comes in. And that would ultimately give us this, the United States Constitution. The Constitution would not only be the basis for our government, but it would also be a limiter on what that government can do. It's not just, okay, we're setting up a government, you're in charge. It was, we're setting up a government, but we don't like that, so we're going to limit what that government can do. At the time, when that was done, there were 10 amendments to the Constitution. As of today, there are 27. 240 odd years. And we've only amended the Constitution 17 times. That in itself tells you just how difficult that process is. It doesn't look difficult on paper, but it is. There are only two ways to legally amend the Constitution. The first is for 2/3 of both houses of Congress. So 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate vote to pass an amendment, which is then sent to all 50 states, and 3/4 of the states must ratify that before it becomes an amendment. Or 2/3 of the 50 states must vote, or their delegates must vote to pass an amendment, and then 3/4 of the states must ratify said amendment. It also requires that 2/3 of the states vote to call an Article 5 convention. I'm actually part of a group, Convention of States Project, calling for an Article 5 convention. Congress will never vote to limit their own power. Even 240 odd years ago, Congress would not have voted to limit their own power. Those who will are so few that it will never happen. You've seen Senator Cruz, and you've heard others in the House and Senate put forth amendments to impose term limits on Congress. It never sees a vote. There is a link in every description I post to the Convention of States Project. Please look at that, because that is very much needed, or I believe it is needed greatly right now, because our government is out of control. That is where I'm going to end this, because the next video will very much be, what is the Constitution? I have several hundred copies of the Constitution sitting 15 feet from me. If you want one, I will send it to you. No cost, not a dime out of your pocket. I have envelopes, I have stamps, I have plenty of ways to get this to you. all you need to do is email me. Do not post it in a comment. You don't want to expose your own information. Email me at the email address in the description of this video, or any of my videos. Just tell me you'd like a copy of the Constitution, and I'll send it. When I run out, I'll make it very public that I have run out. I'll be very glad on that day. And when I get more, I'll start sending them out again. Until next time, let me know what you think. As always, be civil. There was the video I posted on Saturday night. Very much along those lines. Be civil. We can discuss, dissent, debate, disagree vehemently. But we must do so civilly. Otherwise, it's just toddlers screaming at each other like they do over ice cream. And that gets us nowhere. Make sure, please, again, to subscribe and turn on notifications so that you're aware of all content off the schedule. And until next time, have a wonderful day.